All right. Jonathan Taylor, classical guitarist and teacher. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I guess to start out, does the law of 12 tones apply to classical guitar?
Yes. Actually, I was a composer, did lots of, written a lot of orchestral music and so forth, and know all of the composition systems, meaning dodecaphony, which is what, in a sense, you're um, implying, and also the chordal systems. There are systems that codify the major minor system is basically 12 tones, even though the 12 tones are really what's called chroma, meaning chromatic. And in between the, let's say, the white keys of the piano, to make it simple for people, and those scales, I'll tell you something interesting about it. That major minor system is actually a natural system, pretty much discovered by Pythagoras. Um, and why do I say it's natural? When NASA sent out the Cassini probe to Saturn, they translated the light waves that they were getting because they're trying to collect data, right? That's their whole thing. And they corresponded those light waves in nature, meaning the light that's being emitted, or in that case, reflected, because the sun is reflecting off of that planet, that the rings of Saturn hum to an A minor chord. Now,
Huh.
isn't that interesting, right? So those frequencies and those ratios exist within the universe itself. So that was
Yeah.
kind of a long-winded answer to a
That,
simple question, but you can see where my mind goes.
yeah, that's one of the reasons I like music so much is because it's that in tune thing with nature. And the more I think about creativity and just where it comes from and what we're what existence is and our reason for being here and all those things and why we find words and tones and music attractive
Mhm.
or
And
invoking different
why
moods,
McCartney
it's because
even
it's a
asks that question. McCartney says, why do these certain tones, meaning Paul McCartney, uh,
Mhm.
said, why do these certain tones give us these emotional responses and this beauty and all this? And then there's dissonance and consonance, right? So it's a very interesting question. I mean, how is the universe composed? Recently, I was watching a video with Dr. Daniel Hoffman, who is really key now in saying that the space-time theory is now passe. It's not that it didn't do wonderful things for us, evolve techniques and E equals mc squared to change energy, matter into energy, and all the things we've used from that. Your car is an example of E equals mc squared, as it consumes the fuel and puts it into energy, right? So it's not that that is wrong, space-time is wrong, but there's something beyond space-time. And so that construct, we need to use it. It's a method for us, right? Just like a scalpel cutting into the skin, gotta get the bullet out, right? But but he's saying that there it is now serious physicists, and that's the last 100 years or more, last 120 years, let's say, are now questioning that as a representation of reality. It's a construct that we use, and we're in this environment, but it's not necessarily reality.
Hmm.
So here we got off on that.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about simulations and things. I mean, I think that simulation theory explains a whole lot, and it's just a different vocabulary than you would use if you were in church.
So
And
true. And you know, Elon Musk is heavy into that.
hmm,
Elon Musk says things like that, that it could be that it's a simulation.
yeah, it makes more sense that it is because you cover all those bases of intelligent design and a creator and all those things, all those religious aspects from many religions. And
And
then you just
is
say,
it
yeah.
even when we put it into man's systems? I go, well, is it even religious? I just cannot imagine how this could come out about all of existence without an intelligent design, an intelligent creator. And as a youth, I was an atheist, but
Mm.
now I'm not at anyway. And I just have had so many different experiences traveling the world, touring, doing all that stuff like yourself, been to foreign lands and different
Mm.
cultures. And my view is I just don't even see how it's possible. The idea that it's all a chance and just a happenstance, and there's just no way.
At what point in your musical career, just from zero to now, did you realize all the laws of the 12 tones and all these different constructs for that? Like when you first
Sure.
started playing an instrument, certainly that wasn't on your mind, but when did
No,
you
no, no.
start to
Right.
think of that? And
Well,
how did it
that's a
make you feel
great
then?
question. That is a great question. So, as I'll just give a quick synopsis bio. At 4, I was picking out tunes. My grandmother was a silent film organist. I would, of course, hear her playing in the home, and picked up on that. And when I say a silent film organist, I mean she played with all the stars of that era: Charlie Chaplin, Keystone Cops. Lon Chaney Sr., Man of the Thousand Faces. Later, his son became the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. And of course, Harry Houdini, which he did many gigs with Harry Houdini because he would come out to the Pacific Northwest. Well, he was all over the damn place, East Coast and touring. I can tell you a quick Harry Houdini story. He came out here to do a picture in California and spent a year. They rented a house for him, and he did 3 films of that, and he hated it. And why did he hate it? Because he said, you don't make any money doing it, because he could fill up those auditoriums. Everyone
Mhm.
wanted to see him get out of the chains and into the right. He's gonna stop. He's gonna die, right? So I grew up with the background of having music around me. About 4, I was picking out tunes, humming, doing that on like a little ukulele because my baby little fingers. And then about 10, I started to get serious. And about 16, I really started to get serious, Bach, and that, to answer your question, get into the constructs of what is composition, polyphony, for example. Bach, when I saw Segovia play at 16, this will help answer the question. When I saw him play at the age of 16 at Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, downtown LA, I couldn't believe not only his technical prowess, and beautiful music coming out of it, but that all of that is contained on one instrument. He didn't need a rock group. He didn't need 4 players. It's all contained right there. And he's doing 2 and 3, 4 things at once. And so I knew I wanted to not only become a master of the instrument, but also study composition, which I later did in taking not only the standard music classes, but I was a serious composer doing orchestral works in college, in string quartets, brass quintets, what have you, trios. And I tell people with my transcribing of so many works from other instruments onto the classical guitar, that had I not had that background of composition, which is really what your question is about, how are things ordered and constructed, it's much easier to write a piece for, let's say, orchestra than it is to either convert one or write one for the classical guitar. And that's true. And I say that from a composer standpoint, not a player standpoint. So at the college level, I was really serious into composition. And of course, that crossed over because when you're writing pieces where you have an oboe part and then you have a violin part, those are monophonic. Those are all like the oboe is just one line, right? And uh, I would teach violinists when I was head of the Newport Institute of the Arts many moons ago, Kemosabe. And they would ask me, how do you do so many dyads, triads, tetrachords? We just call them chords on guitar because you're doing 2 things that. And I said, well, that's the rub, isn't it? That's the key. Because your instrument, which is mostly monophonic, it's not that a violin doesn't do triads and that, it does, but not every single second, which is mostly what the classical guitar is doing, right? So I would tell them, well, that is the key to the beauty of the instrument of the classical guitar, as well as it is tuned differently than the standard orchestral instruments. Standard orchestral instruments are tuned in thirds, and the guitar is tuned in fourths, one third between the G and the B. And so what does that mean? Unique voicings. Very different voicings than one would use with the other orchestral instruments. So I hope that answered your question of when I started to, think, what about the structure of the music itself? Not just the simplicity of pop or folk music is chords and melody. Well, your first composition should be, if you want to really progress, write a two non-pitched instruments piece that does not rely upon the major minor structure. And why is that? To get you back, pull the camera back and get you back looking that that's this system and this is another system, or can be incorporated in a higher level.
At what point in playing does that just click into focus at some point where you're like, I'm playing these chords, I'm playing whatever it is you're learning on, and then one day you go, well, this I can do the same thing on this instrument, on this instrument, on this instrument. This is like a little piece of this instrument, and you can put it all together.
Right.
Is it an epiphany type moment, or are you slow into it?
I think you have many epiphanies, and I think both of the pairs of opposites are there, that you have epiphanies and slow both. And why is because you're gaining skills. Just like you use your fingers to do this. Many of the times when I used to teach, and I don't really teach that much anymore, I'm recording and I'm performing and I'm filming and that, arranging, adapting pieces. But when I used to teach a lot, I would tell people, if you don't know what your fingers are doing, they will rebel against you, and you must learn these specific skills. Just like a ballet dancer has, 6 positions? They go on point, then they do this position like this, and then, they have different positions. And that comprises, by learning those specific skills, now they can do Swan Lake, right? And so it is a combination of both of those things. And do you have epiphanies and moments of realization? Absolutely. Segovia, when he was commissioning composers to write for him, they would send him a manuscript and he'd say, really, how the hell do you expect me to do this? Because they were not schooled in the instrument, because it's kind of outside the orchestra, right? And so the composer had to write through the player, and the player had to say, well, this movement is possible, this one is not. I can adapt it and I can modify it under these conditions, but you're not going to usurp Newton's laws. You're not going to usurp certain laws of motion and movement, and of how the instrument is inherently constructed must be organic.
It's strange. Like I can think of a bunch of things in life that are like that, where you learn those little pieces every time. And for me, swimming was like that, where every time you go to the pool, you're doing your normal thing you do, but you try a different type of stroke or a different way of breathing, and you start to realize, oh, I can go this much faster when I do this, but it feels smoother when I do this. And
sure. Well, your point is perfect, because the guitar doesn't really have a solid pedagogy as the violin and piano do for 300 years, let's say. Is there some pedagogy? Yes, there's some, but it's spotty. And what you're saying about the swimming, think about the great Michael Phelps, right? The body itself, what's he, 10,000 calories a day when he was doing, because he'd be in that cold pool all day long. I remember hearing him say he went back to Europe because he didn't get to see any of it. He was either in the pool or sleeping in the hotel room. So he said, I want to actually see. I saw it for a minute passing, the Eiffel Tower, right? So to your point, yeah, there is improvement, and the technique. Segovia used to say sometimes you have to go halfway up the mountain, and all of a sudden you go, wow, that's not going to bring me to the zenith. That path won't work. I've got to go through the Khyber Pass. I've got to go a proper way, what do I have to do? Go all the way down to the mountain, try to find the Khyber Pass, try to find the proper way up. So exactly. And refinement, in science and in life, it's discovery is usually against the grain of whatever it is. Is improvement and refinement? I go, absolutely. You can now put a nuclear bomb into this space. You can put it there with electronics, and it's nothing. And it's 30 times more powerful, 100 times more powerful. So, but the discovery had to go against all the grain at the time.
Yeah, I see it as in, if you're learning something or trying to perfect some sort of skill, that every time you do it, if you learn a little thing, no matter how small, like with the swimming again, if you learn a thing that you can go a fraction of a second faster, or it feels more smooth or whatever, then that's a successful time out for
Totally.
that.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, because human beings, that's what they do. And half the time your mind is so dark, it is so ignorant of I tell people, if you want to grow, that's why I hate the idea of perfection. Oh, it's perfection. I go, I don't want to be perfect. I want to grow. Right? I want to grow. And if I'm perfect, why do I need to grow? So exactly what you're saying, if you get this one movement perfect, it will now carry over into other parts of you. People say, oh, you improved the music. I go, I did not improve the music one iota. I improved myself. That's all I can do. I can improve the music's already there. There it is, right on the page. See, there's the notes. There it is. And as I refine it, it becomes a more pristine interpretation, or more without dross, a more refined and erudite interpretation.
Yeah.
So I agree with
go,
totally what you're saying. Pardon me for interrupting. That's rude.
You're all right. You have to go through all those separate paths too, to be able to find those dead ends, because maybe that's going to help on something else too. I mean, you don't always have to go to the top of the mountain when you're doing a work.
Right.
So
right.
then you get those people that say, I've forgotten more than you will learn. And I understand that a little more, because you probably do forget all those little tidbits if you don't use them all the time and practice all the time.
Or you're not even, you could have them incorporated into you, and you're not even aware where you came from, that this is how you learn. How many people, I don't remember how I learned my letters or the alphabet, or how I drew them as a child. I don't remember going, how do you say this word or that word? What's the pronunciation? I don't recall those steps.
I talked to a vector artist not too long ago. I think her episode is out this week. Rebecca Ati, and she was talking about how you learn things. And I discovered, like, visually how you learn things, and then how it sets up in your mind. And I was remembering how I learned the months of the year in kindergarten, and I can visualize it perfectly on the board when we were putting them in order. It's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. And then we ran out of space on the side of the board. So then they just put them across the bottom. So when I think of the months of the year, that's how I visualize them.
Sure.
This is on the left side, and then September starts the angle over this way. So it makes me wonder how much other things that we're not aware of how we learn something a certain way, that's just in that programming that we forgot.
And then we have confirmation bias. We confirm, even though, And we may interpret a fact, if it doesn't fit into our narrative or conception, incorrectly. And when I say incorrectly, it may be because it won't reach our objective. And that's the only reason it's incorrect, that it's not helpful to it.
That was also one of those things when I was in the policing and going through the academy, where they said, we prefer if you never shot before, because we can teach you how to shoot instead of having to go through you unlearning all those things we don't want you to know.
Sure.
So I imagine that's got to be the same way in learning an instrument too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Half the battle is unlearning. I couldn't agree more. Half the battle is get rid of your bad habits. That's a bad. I remember sometimes I would, I taught master classes in Barbados and other places as well, but I'm thinking of Barbados, and meaning Barbados, the Caribbean, not Barbados, Spain. And there'd be somebody, mindlessly going through a scale or something. I'd say, stop. Don't do that. All you're doing is ingraining a bad habit. And you don't want to do that. I say, it's better not to do anything there and to do this correct one, so you get into the good pattern.
Yeah. Makes it easier later too, because that leads into that other thing.
Right.
When you are composing, where do you do that mostly? Like, is there a space that you have for that?
Sure. Right now I'm not really composing. I'm transcribing one piece. I'm kind of making an arrangement of Take 5 by what's his name? And I never use my instrument, the guitar, to compose on. And the reason why is then you're playing, you see. And if you're proficient on an instrument, no matter what it is, if you start composing on that, there are exceptions to this. Other people feel differently, as Chopin felt differently. But in my case, I don't want to do that. I just want a sound source. So I'll use the piano as a sound source because I'm incompetent, because I don't play piano, because I'm an idiot. And that's what I want to be. I want to be an idiot. I want the pure music first on an instrument that I am not proficient upon. And then orchestration comes later. People think, oh, you do the orchestration. I go, orchestration is merely color and knowing the limits or the areas and the sonic possibilities of that instrument. The music itself is on a purer level. It's not tied to that. It's not yoked or bonded with that. It is, then I can say, orchestra, I'll put the oboe here, I'll do that, maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll do the viola there, and I start going through that. And that's, quote, orchestration. And that is why, one of the reasons why I can adapt things to the classical guitar. For example, the Bond themes, okay? The Bond films, I've taken a few film scores and reduced them for solo classical guitar, just one instrument playing. And I've done that with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, with the Wizard of Oz pieces, and with the Bond themes and other things, American folk songs, for instance. I have an American medley 1, 2, and 3, and 2 of them are on my Guitar Chronicles album, which is with Warner Brothers and HitLab. But I have a lot of albums. I have like 32 albums. So I'm now looking at adapting different things. And wherever I am, people say, how do you choose? I go, I have to like it. I have to have a connection with it. For me. Now, if I had like somebody was hiring me to do something, I would do that. But I probably wouldn't even take the job. But it has to move me or say something to me. It has to be something I resonate with.
Have you done scores for like motion pictures, like
No,
whether it's a movie or?
I have orchestral pieces that could be adapted easily to motion pictures. In other words, complete pieces, But people say, well, that's for this. I go, it doesn't matter. It's interchangeable. That bullet will fit in this gun and work.
Mm,
I don't know why, but it will.
mm.
So I can do that. So it won't even matter if I write orchestral scores now, because I actually have them that I can say, well, this would work for this picture. It
Yeah,
will
it's
evoke what you're looking for, and it's organic.
there you go. The evoking. Do you, when you're composing multi pieces, do you pick those pieces based on the music itself, or is it thinking about what the sound is of that instrument and you just go through experience or through experimentation that you're like, okay, I'm going to throw a piccolo in here for a second and then go to these
I
things?
never do the orchestration until the end, meaning until I'm done composing the core music, because that is incidental. But I'm sure other people don't think of it that way. They associate they associate the sound with that instrument. And I say, well, I'll give you an example. George Lucas, when he started to do Star Wars, sent his sound people out to the deserts here in California, Joshua Tree, or wherever the hell it was. And he'd have them bang on metal pieces, junk laying out in the desert, right? Refuse. And he would have them do different things. Why? Well, he wanted that real sound. He wanted that sound that is coming from that source. So I might do something like that. But right now I'm adapting for guitar stuff. So I don't want you to think I'm composing orchestra music now, because at this time I'm not doing that. I'm filming, I'm adapting, I'm rehearsing pieces to, film. But it is a very common idea that the music should be associated with this instrument. Well, if I've adapted the songs of the Wizard of Oz to the classical guitar, it's obviously has not been composed for the classical guitar. Yeah, I can tell you 1,000 stories about that film and about how those songs came about. I'll tell you one quick thing. You should have never heard "Over the Rainbow." It was taken out of the pictures 3 times, and nobody would know about it if that had transpired. But what is it now? It's one of the most beloved American in the American songbook that ever was, like White Christmas and many others, George Gershwin's pieces in that. So in terms of adapting, you have to have a certain type of mind and a certain background to do that. And the guitar is without a doubt the most difficult. The classical guitar is what I'm talking about, not the electric guitar. Is certainly the most difficult instrument to not only play, and by the way, that's been said by many great artists, like the Jascha Heifetz said, the violin is the most difficult instrument to play, with the exception of the classical guitar. And I'm saying that because the technical problems are almost insurmountable. Easy to play a few chords and a melody and be a pop person and that, but to master the thing, that's a whole other thing.
Do you see in pop music or rock or whatever, do you see hints of classical trained
Oh,
guitarists, or
everywhere.
is it okay?
Sure. I won't say guitarists, but I will say classical trained players. Certainly, many. What's her name? Pat Benatar was an operatic vocalist.
Okay.
Robert Plant is a wonderful singer. So there are many pop people. A lot of not a lot, but some of the pieces. How Gentle is the Rain is a Bach minuet. That's a Bach minuet. And there are many examples of that. I'm just pulling that out of my head. So, yes, there are, because they need to make a living. There are pop people that need to make a living.
I like that. I think it's a Beethoven story about how he came up with the dun 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 dun, that it was based on his landlady's laugh when he said, I'm going to write this, I'm writing a composition now, and then I'm going to pay my rent with it. And she said, you're going to pay your rent with something you write? Ha 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 ha.
Beautiful. And to your point, exactly, that's where the sound source idea comes from.
Mm,
See, did it matter that he heard it from a human voice in a laugh, in a pattern, or that he heard it, walking down the street and heard the carriage wheels ride? In the Seventh Symphony, he was waking up from being in a carriage ride through, I think, the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest. I think it might have been another forest, and the title of the movement is upon waking upon pleasant feelings or something like that. And uh, when you see those inspirations, I'll give you an example of your whole point here. In the 19th century, there's a classical guitarist who's a minor composer called Francisco Tarrega, and he's a wonderful composer for the guitar, meaning he knew the instrument so well because he's virtuoso. And he wrote a very
we are resumed, and he was a virtuoso guitar
guitarist,
player.
Francisco Tarrega of the 19th century. And he would go down and, of course, lived in Spain. And he would listen to the fountains of Alhambra, and there'd be that trickling water. You know how when you have those fountains, it trickles here, trickles there. And he heard that pattern, and he turned that into the tremolo.
Mm,
That constant ostinato, that constant.
mhm.
And he wrote that. And I say, isn't that a perfect example of human creativity? It takes the environment, here's something in one realm, even though that's a sound realm, I guess one could say, and translates it over to something else. And I'm sure, that's true with so many innovations or inventions. I'm trying to think, you probably would know this, how Colt made the Colt 45. There's always stories that how you translate and do that. The guy that discovered penicillin, he came back to the lab and saw the mold on the plate and made what I call the magical link, and realized, and that's just codifying it. And that's the 40s. They were still using sulfa drugs back in the 40s, not
Mhm.
penicillin yet. And everyone knows that in the Civil War, they would amputate legs because gangrene, and there was nothing there to fight that. And you think about the fishwife in Greece 2,000 years ago who has a moldy piece of bread. She's been feeling sick, and she eats the moldy bread. She doesn't know why she got better, but she got better. And
Yeah.
so there are thousands, maybe, tens of thousands of relationships like that. So Tarrega created one of the great Spanish masterpieces by that same action that you're talking about.
Hmm. That penicillin, I looked up how to make penicillin one time because I was like, if the world falls apart, that would be a good thing to know how to do. And there are
Sure.
so many steps in that it's amazing. So
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I'm going to really need to study this some more, which I did not. But you're just going to have to take a chance with the moldy bread and hope that's the right strain.
Yeah. And it may not
So
be the right, remember, like your ampicillin, penicillin, it's the right
yeah,
spectrum of
it could kill
bacteria.
you or it could make you better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 50-50.
Yeah. Either way, you're going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So then, what type of music do you listen to now if you're just listening to music? Is it mainly classical, or do you listen to
I
I
listen to all
I don't
types
know
of
if I'd call
music.
it simpler, but like
Yeah, I
pop
know what you
music?
mean. I know what you're saying. The I listen to all types of music, not rap. I don't consider it music. even though it has the element of rhythm, it doesn't have melody or harmony. And but and that came about. There's an example of creativity. The kids, they took the music programs away, so they couldn't learn how to play the violin in school. So they found a way to make that, and I admire that. I also admire if you can get out of the ghetto doing that. Wow, I consider that a great ingenuity in that way. In terms of its musical value, that's a whole other thing. But to answer your question, um, I don't listen to so much music because I'm either learning a piece, I'm maybe transcribing a piece. So it's not like I'm listening to music all the time because I'm already in here. It's already in
Mm.
here. I get in the car, I never turn the radio on.
Mm.
I never turn or your phone, I rarely do that because I've got things going on. I might listen to a piece because I'm going to arrange it and I want to see what where I can take it, and I want to kind of review it, right? So when you ask me what type of music, I listen to all types of music, and that's really it.
Do you think that, because I don't know if it would be possible to understand it a different way because you are you, but do you think that you listen to music differently than a person that doesn't have all that
Oh
training?
my
When you
God,
hear
yes.
something, are you pulling it all apart going, oh, I see what they did there, and they bridged
Oh
that
yeah. Oh,
over?
I have to because of my background. Just like a doctor, if he's looking at your heart,
Yeah.
he's looking at the aorta, he's looking at the systolic and diastolic. He knows things, that are way beyond my understanding of the function of that organ. And so I'm looking at and listening to music in a very different way. To be able to hear the music beyond the instrumentation, that's a skill in itself.
Mm.
Because when
Yeah,
people
I
say,
think.
well, what do you mean you don't hear the instrument? And I go, it's meaningless. It's only because you're associating that with that. And you think that's the proper way. But there's a higher realm, a dimension where that exists without the instrumentation.
Do you visualize music when you listen to it? Are you seeing the
Sometimes,
notes or the? Okay.
sometimes it depends, it's in and out. Because, when
Mhm.
you learn something, then now I know where my wallet is, right? You learn, oh, I better place it here, I'll forget it, right? So you learn those behaviors. And so your mind is uh, partly on automatic, of course, right?
Hmm. So, where do you have a specific place when you're writing or working on music that you like it's set aside for that so you get into that creative mindset? And that
I
doesn't
just
mean you
need a
don't write
room.
other places, but
I just need a room. What was it? I'm trying to think. It was Benjamin Franklin said, "Man's problems are because he can't sit alone in a room," something
mm,
like that. And so I just need a room that is quiet in a way. I don't want to be around people or in a loud restaurant or something. So I want to be alone somewhere, and it doesn't matter where sitting properly and my back isn't screwed up. So it just be alone. That's why. So I spent years of discipline. You learn discipline and it carries over to other things, of course. And just like in your soldiering, of course, uh, you learn something and it carries over into so many things. I'm content sitting in a room alone where other people, drive them crazy. Like the lockdowns, that meant nothing to me. Meant nothing. Do I know three wonderful women that own three separate restaurants that were destroyed by the lockdowns and they had their lives destroyed needlessly? Yes. But did I? And I would go in there. I'd actually go in the restaurants when uh, you shouldn't have and try to give them business because I didn't want them to get screwed up, right? To get
mhm.
screwed over. So but to me, the lockdowns in a certain that meant nothing. Where everybody else are driven crazy. Oh, I have to go there. I have to do this. I go, what's the difference? You are you, and you're always going to be you. People say, I, uh, you know, you're, I want to change. My view is yes, you can change and you do change and you grow and you develop. And at the same time, you're always you. At the same time, there'll never be anybody like you. When you die, the creature that you are, there'll never be anything like you on the face of the earth. You're totally unique. Every man and every woman is completely different. There are billions of people that, died that, nobody knows anything about them.
Hmm.
So, with regard to being alone or how I compose or arrange in that, I just need a quiet room somewhere where there's not like noise going on around me.
How do you see or think about creativity, or do you with music?
I think it's maybe the only, it is important to have the hero go outside of the tribe, go on an adventure, come back, and teach what he learned. And without that, there's no advancement. I'll give you an example. There are many cultures that punish creativity. Regimentation is the main thing, and uh, to me, instrumentality, meaning a human being that has created something from the environment out of their mind, is the ultimate thing. American individuality is, to me, the most important thing that occurred in human history. And the reason why that is because people say, oh, we were so great. We went over there to Germany in Second World War and trounced them. And my view is, I go, they were 1,000 times better soldiers than we were. We had 6 weeks to train. And why would we victorious? We are gigantic. We had the greatest manufacturing in human existence. And we trounced them, laws of numbers, overwhelming force. And without that creativity and instrumentality, life would be very bad. The cultures that don't promote that, they have adopted our systems, the light bulb, the internal combustion engine, the spacecraft. What you can go thousands and thousands of things. So, what do I think of creativity? It may be the only important thing. Is it important to learn the structures that were there before? Absolutely. Liberal arts education, read the classics, whether it be in religion, read the Vedas, as the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, all the Sufi poets, the Sufi masters, or read literature, read Tolstoy, read. I tell people they should read Marx to show what crap it is. My view is, you should know Das Kapital. You should know the crap. How are you going to have a mode of comparison? So it's important to do that. So do I think creativity is just every human being should be encouraged to do that, because they find themselves, you're always you, but you find aspects of yourself that will propel you forward. And wandering is part of it. Bezos says this all the time when he has meetings. He says, oh, well, you have to wander. You're going to wander, wander, wander. He encourages all that. And look how far he's gotten with his business. Everyone knows that. Hell, I just ordered an iPhone case here that's going to arrive in a few hours. So, but, and I'm happy to have ordered it. I needed it. Don't want to drop that phone. So I think creativity is in so many different endeavors. Music is one endeavor, and I actually believe music can heal people. Now that sounds very metaphysical, and some scientists might call me and say, "Oh, bull crap." And my response is, "I've seen it, and I'm not giving you. I'm giving you that this person is better off because of it. Whatever that is, they're better off, and that's my goal. My goal is to bring beauty to the world, and some people it's healing, other people it's enlightenment." So with regard to creativity, I think it's that is why America is what it is. It created. How the hell did we win against the greatest power, the Brits? Hundreds of ships in the harbor. Those soldiers were so much better than farmers and merchants, is what we were. I mean, it was our creativity. Swamp Fox, Francis Marion in the Carolinas, would get up in the tree. He knew those back areas, the swamp areas, so well. And he learned from the French Indian War how to scalp people. He'd get up and he'd scalp the colonels, and then they'd take pot shots, all guerrilla, right? And Washington's credo was don't engage the enemy most of the time. And he wandered around the colonies for 4 or 5 years on that horse. There's a theory that he, I know we're getting off into revolutionary history, but that's creativity. I go, there's a theory. When I was in Barbados, I actually I went and visited the slave cabin that he was recuperating from. The only time Washington left the colonies was with his cousin when he was like 18. And he went down to Barbados, and he contracted TB. And so there's a theory that he got the germs in him, went through it as a young man, built up his immune so he could ride around and didn't croak all those years of Valley Forge and all the rest of it, right? So creativity, I think, is the most important thing. There's a saying that every child is a genius until they're crushed by the system. And I believe that. Because I see a kid, I go, my God, look at this kid. I love him. He's great. And he's curious about everything. Why does it do that? Huh? And I go, there's his creativity right there. He's learning his environment. So I think creativity should be taught in every, God, don't get me on our school system, should be taught in every school, and every child should be fostered and given tools and encouragement and all that to bring out that creativity. And our society would be even greater technologically and in many ways. That's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. We went through some topics. How do you think we connect with creativity? Do you think it's something that's within us that we manifest through our own experiences? Or is it something outside of us that we kind of tap into?
Boy, now that is a excellent question. That's a brilliant question, because now Dr. Hoffman is saying the space-time, as I said earlier, is just a construct, and there's something beyond that. And the question is, I used to not ever believe in life after death, and now I do. And the reason why I do is experiences for so many years have taught me. I've been in so many strange places, as yourself, as you have as well, in so many different cultures and so many different places, that I say there's something going on that is so mystical and so giant. I mean, we're just like little mites crawling on this sphere, right? We're like little mites. And I think that it's a combination of both. It's outside, because our senses are looking, our eyes, we're hearing, we're touching something, feeling something, smelling it. They say back 30,000 years ago, you had a greater sense of smell because you needed it for your environment, and you don't need it now because you just go to the grocery store to get your food, or the In-N-Out or something. And So those adaptability mechanisms, and I also think that your mind is constantly associating and putting together things to work your will, whatever that means in the present context. What is going to assist me and help me and boost me or move me toward what I want in the environment right now? And how can I juggle these images in my brain to do that? So I'll give you an example in the major minor system and the other systems. If you are limited to only the major minor systems, what you'll probably do is write yourself out in a very short amount of time. It's a saying about Vivaldi that he wrote one song 1,000 times.
Mm.
And why is that? Because you're not using the other part of your brain that is collating data in a different way. And you've heard artists where you go, my God, it sounds just like the other song he did. And so bore me, bore me, bore me. I did a composition. Okay, I'll tell you this story and why I am going down this track. When my first year in college, I'm studying with a great composition teacher, a real composition teacher, not just theory of the major minor system. That's simplistic and all been done. It's all been said before. There's nothing new. And I brought him a piece, and good, good, good. And then the next piece I brought him, he said, what is this, Jonathan? He said, this is the other piece. And I go, you're right. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm back to the drawing board. Because you're just saying the same thing here that you did on the last piece. I go, you're right. What I'm going to argue? When you're right, and you're right. So I went back and had to modify that. And how does one do that? One has techniques. For instance, I'll give you an example to your viewers. And if one wants to find the permutations of a melody, let's say it's a melody you have, a raga from an Indian piece, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And you take a Babbitt square. This actually ferrets out and gives you the retrograde of the piece. It gives you the different imitations of that melody. Now you have material to choose from. See? People say, how do you come up with so many things? I go, what do I leave out? That's what I'm looking at. What do I leave out? Because I'm too verbose in the musical terms about it. You see? I could make that song go on 20 minutes. He only wanted to be 3. So there you go.
Do you visualize then the creativity that's outside of us? Do you visualize it in any way? Like, is it something that you think creativity of music comes from a different place than creativity for writing, or maybe it's you're tapping into a different spot, or
I think
maybe it's all connected but different somehow?
Yeah, I think the form is different, and I think it probably that human creativity comes from the same place, but you're using that form for a writer. Maybe they're writing in Spanish or English or Chinese, whatever they're writing. An example of the Chinese culture is it does not reward or creativity, and it's not that those people are not very smart and very efficient. Now the government, that's a whole other thing, but the people themselves, but it does not reward creativity. Where is the discovery of the orbit of atoms, like Niels Bohr in Denmark, the great Danish physicist? The model that we have is basically taken from that's what he won his Nobel for. So I think that people get tribal. I think they get narrow in their view, and they feel that security, and it's not, because it's not security. I'll give you an example. Look at Hitler attacking the Jews, right? Now, let's look at that just for, not to get in politics or any of that here, but just to show you from another point of view. There are hardly any Jews in the world. There's like 16 million. Out of, what are we, 7, 8 billion, whatever the population is? I go, that's nothing. It's not even 1%. I go, do you know how many they used to try to make fun of Einstein and called it Jewish physics? And I laugh at such an idea. Now I'll tell people, do you know how many Nobel Prize winners are Jews? 187. Jesus Christ, or Adonai, or Jehovah. I go, my God, that's like a lot. So this tiny subset of people, 16 million maybe, and there's 187 Nobels, and it's Jewish physics. I go, you're an idiot. You're killing the very people that are pushing things forward in so many ways, in hundreds and thousands of ways. So that shows you kind of a tribalism that you narrow because you don't like that group of people. You narrow your vision. I go, this is stupid. It's stupid. How are we? I go, let's use that. My God, we want to use that info. It's good stuff. So that to me, that philosophy, and I'm just using that as an example. It could be 1,000 examples on the same theme. Yeah, and I didn't mean to pick one group or one period in history of that. And if we don't do that, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We want all of that. We want that contribution. We want that creativity that people are trying to push things in a good way forward.
Why do you think some people embrace or seem to embrace creativity more or are more interested in it?
Their background is not like I had when people ask me, what about your family? I said, I had the greatest mother that ever walked the face of the earth. My mother was the most wonderful human being you could possibly imagine. And she didn't give a damn if I became a classical guitarist or music or other. She could care less. Whatever it was I wanted to pursue, I was free to pursue. And she would present as a child. I remember she would present, at different stages, like games. Kids play these games. And she would present this game, Parcheesi, or this game, Scrabble, whatever those games are. And I think my environment, I was raised by my grandmother, who was the silent film organist, and then my mother, who was not musical in any way, no musical thing at all. And that's who I was raised by. And so I believe that the freedom and the love that they gave me opened me to be an open person. Creative people are very open. They're not closed. People that are closed, rarely creative. They have a different thing, like a government bureaucrat, typical idea, right? They have a different thing. Oh, I want my 9 to 5. I want my, food, my money, and my house, and that's what they are. But if you open yourself to the world, of course, you have the chance of getting your ass kicked. That's also true. But that's life. The hero's journey is to open and to add and to create something that is good. So I think that my background is one of the reasons I became this way. And, maybe somebody has a contrary view where they say, well, my dad was a jerk and beat the hell out of me, and he created his way out of his environment, so maybe there's another view on it too.
Do you have a way of maybe habit, or I don't want to say ritual, but something where you can connect more easily with creativity when you want to? Like, is there a state of mind that you get into? Or
I think at this stage in my life, you think very differently when you're older than when you're younger. You think differently. It's just because you're a conglomeration of so many different experiences, right? So driving out here from Orange County, California, where I live, and I'm out here like 20 minutes from Vegas in Boulder City, Nevada. And driving out here, I was looking at the beautiful mountains and the beautiful clouds and an area here that I hadn't been to before where I am now. Usually, if I'm going to Vegas or something, I'm taking another route. And I think that you change because you're a conglomeration of all of those experiences. Your mind becomes more unified. It's hard for me to get angry, for example. I can't even get angry. It's difficult for me. Uh, I just don't feel it anymore. I understand, so I don't get angry. Uh, I might get angry if I, bump my toe, right? Or hurt myself physically, slam something on my leg. Uh, but I think you change as time goes on. It's natural. At least the person that is open to it does.
On the idea of the musical career and touring, before you started doing touring around, is the reality of how it was what you thought it would be? Like when you thought about, I'm going to go around the world and do some classical guitar and some other things, is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. Probably not the way you think it is, because how do you when you speculate or estimate something, when you get there, it's different than what you speculated about. They didn't know that you wouldn't fall through the surface of the moon when Buzz and Neil landed, right? And they didn't
It's a
know.
soft cheese.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were, and it's green. It's green cheese, of course, right? So yeah, maybe moldy, so it could be used for penicillin.
That's where we got
So
penicillin.
that's where
From
we
moon
got
cheese.
it. Definitely. So the I think that we're each on an individual journey and on a collective journey. And I think that creative people will have fuller lives. It won't be as secure as other people's lives. I'll give you an example. Freud, 3 great discoveries Freud made. Sex is part of everything. The dreams that you have can tell you about yourself and your life. They're symbolic representations. And third, neurosis. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because he made a great discovery, contribution that a lot of people don't know. He studied 19th century prostitutes in England and different people, and those people were trying to just make sure they had a room for a week. And so he realized that the more you can tolerate uncertainty, the less neurosis you will have. And the more structured that you cannot tolerate the uncertainty, you will put up a defense or a wall. That's a great discovery, because it means to build yourself, you want to be able to tolerate uncertainty. And I think I have done that a lot in the past. I didn't know that I was going to be stalked in India and almost murdered. I didn't know I was going to, I was in the Amazon and I got cholera. And that's a long story in itself. Maybe next time that I was going to croak. So those uncertainties, boy, when I landed in the Amazon in Brazil, you know that the light shines differently because it's down here. The sun, right, is facing the earth, and it's down here. And of course, we're up here, right? The light is actually different. I was trying to figure out, why do the colors look so weird? And I realized it was how the sun and my eyes had adapted to North America, and here I'm in South America, right? Way far away. And So to adapt, and boy, you realize I was going down the Amazon River, and you see an anaconda wrapping around one of those trees and vines. You realize you're just part of the food chain.
Mm.
Your ego goes right out the window, right? So I think uncertainty, what Freud discovered, that the more we can tolerate, is a key point. And I think we should build ourselves using tests. I did this, and then I'll get off this subject. I did this in Calcutta. So I'm in Calcutta, and it is the worst poverty you've ever seen as an American. Well, you've seen a lot of poverty because you're over in the Middle East. So you ought to know. But as an American, you're not used to that. You're used to all sorts of things that you don't even know until you get there. And I was in Calcutta, and I go, whoa, this is like bad. And I said, you know what? I'm going to test my courage. And so I walked down the streets of Calcutta at midnight. Why? Because I knew it was very dangerous. I knew it was dangerous. There'd be criminals out. When you're starving to death, you know what I'm saying? You're starving to death. So I think that principle of tolerating uncertainty is very important to the development of a creative person.
I agree. What's your lessons learned then from touring around, like things you would have done differently next time, or if you had it to do over again, you do different, or is it
Sure
that doesn't exist?
I took 3 days to get to India, and I'll never do that again, or I'll kill myself. Because I was sleeping on the plane, on the many planes, and the stewardess, woke me up, and I was snoring so loudly on the plane because I hadn't slept in 3 days, right?
Yeah.
And I realized that I had done that, and she was faking it, like, would you like some tea? Yeah. Right. But she just wanted, that guy is snoring and bugging everyone. So some of the lessons I've learned is that what lies behind us and what lies before us are little matters compared to what lies within us.
What's the best way for people to follow your work?
Go to Google Play if you're an Android user, or Apple Store if you're a iPhone user, and type in Jonathan Taylor, no break in the name. And I have an app, and on that I have free to download and free. Oh, by the way, I tell you it was free. I have a series called Adventures in Touring that goes through stories of me touring. I have performance videos, I have audio files, posts, etc. And that's the best way to find me. Or on any of the streaming channels, Spotify, Apple, all that. If you just type in Jonathan Taylor guitar into Google, you will find me. Make sure to put guitar in there. Otherwise, you will get a black football player. And although I look like a black football player, I am not a black football player. And so, and he's a wonderful football player, by the way. If you just type Jonathan Taylor guitar into Google, you'll find all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
And Jonathan Taylor in the Google app, the Google Play, and for Android, and Apple for iPhone.
Okay. I'll put that information in the show notes, so if people want to see it, they can. I have some other, like your Instagram, and I think a Twitter or an X, and then some sort of adobe.com website that I like. That website, I haven't seen anything like that before, but
that's you know what that is? It's called a electronic press kit, EPK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I send that out to, manager people and people like that, booking people,
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you very much for your conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of other directions and things we could talk about again, so perhaps we will one day.
I'd love it. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. You're a great interviewer, and I appreciate your hard work and service.
All
And
right.
know that.
Thank you.
And I want to declare right now, thank you for defending our country, and thank you for all the work you've done.
No problem. There's other people doing it. If they didn't, we wouldn't have anything. So,
No, that's so true. So true.
all right. I'll talk to you on the other side of this. I don't have a guitar solo. This is a drum solo, so we'll just go with that.
Okay.